The salt-laced air, sharp and cold, bit at my exposed skin. It was a familiar sting, one I hadn't sought out in years, yet here I was, a ghost at the edge of the water. The yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number. The words themselves felt like a brand, a reminder of a foolish mistake, a misplaced trust. The moon, a sliver of bone, cast a pale, unhelpful light across the restless water, each ripple a whispered accusation. Disgraced. That's what they called me. A broken tool, discarded after a job went south, after he slipped through my fingers. It wasn't the usual creak of a moored vessel or the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. This was deliberate, precise. My gut, a long dormant muscle, twitched. Rows of sleek, expensive toys barbed gently, their masts like skeletal fingers pointing towards the indifferent stars. But one was different. A faint, almost imperceptible flicker of light, then another. Not the warm glow of interior lights, but a sharp, sterile beam cutting through the gloom. It emanated from a vessel moored at slip number 17. My slip, my destination. But the manifest, the one the anonymous tip had been so insistent about, had listed this as a discreet drop, a simple exchange of. Well, that's where the vagueness began. The tip had been cryptic, laced with a fear that felt too real to be a prank. I started walking, my footsteps unnervingly loud on the wooden planks. Each step was a negotiation with the past, a hesitant advance into territory I'd sworn to abandon. It was too much, too flashy for a clandestine meeting. My eyes narrowed. The tip had been specific. 17, but not the usual occupant. A detail that had nagged at me, a loose thread in an otherwise tightly woven narrative. Years of living on the fringes had taught me to blend, to become part of the background. I reached the edge of the slip, the water below a black mirror reflecting the sliver of moon. The yacht, a behemoth named the Siren's Call in tasteful gold lettering, was unnervingly silent, save for the rhythmic thrum of an engine that sounded too powerful, too clean for a simple exchange. Then I saw them. They were working. With tools I recognized instantly specialized cutting torches, sophisticated lock-picking devices, things that required a level of expertise far beyond that of common thieves. They moved with an unnerving efficiency, like a well-oiled machine. One of them, a hulking silhouette against the faint interior light, was meticulously dismantling a reinforced access panel near the stern. The other, leaner, more agile, was working on the yacht's primary security console, her movements quick and precise. It wasn't a theft. It was an invasion. And then I saw it. The way the hulking figure held his torch, the precise angle of the cut, the almost surgical precision with which he manipulated the equipment. It was a signature. My breath hitched. The air suddenly felt thinner, harder to draw into my lungs. Years ago, I'd studied every detail of his work. They called him the architect because his crimes were masterpieces of planning and execution. And he had vanished, swallowed by the city, leaving me with a career in tatters and a phantom I couldn't exorcise. These weren't just similar methods. This was him, or someone who had studied him, replicated him down to the smallest detail. But why? Why now? And why this yacht? The anonymous tip, the wrong slip number. It had all been a prelude, a breadcrumb leading me back to this desolate place, back to the ghosts I tried so hard to bury. This wasn't just a job. This was a reckoning. The Siren's Call, barbing innocently in the water, felt like a trap, a stage set for a drama I thought I'd left behind. The tension in the air was a palpable thing, a coiled spring ready to snap. I was here, at the yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number, and the past had just decided to pay a very unwelcome visit. The words themselves felt like a brand, a reminder of a foolish mistake, a misstep that had cost me everything. Now, they were a calling card, a breadcrumb leading me back into the shadows I'd sworn to leave behind. My fingers traced the rough, splintered wood of the pier. It was the kind of quiet that amplified every rustle, every creak, making my own breathing sound like a drumbeat against the night. I'd received the anonymous tip, a terse, unsigned note tucked beneath my door. It spoke of a meeting, a rendezvous that never materialized, leaving me with only the biting wind and a gnawing unease. This wasn't just a wrong turn, it was an invitation. A glint of metal caught my eye, half hidden beneath a coil of thick rope near the end of the pier. I knelt, the damp seeping through the knees of my worn trousers. It was a cufflink, intricately designed, a tiny silver serpent with emerald eyes. I recognized the craftsmanship. Such ostentatious detail wasn't common. It spoke of wealth, of a certain flair, a flair that had once been a signature. My breath hitched. This was it, the first tangible thread, pulled from the silken web of deceit. I slipped the cufflink into a small evidence bag I always carried, a habit ingrained so deeply it was now instinct. The weight of it in my palm was a familiar, unwelcome sensation. It was the weight of responsibility, of unfinished business. I stood, my gaze sweeping across the rows of expensive vessels bobbing gently in their berths. Each one was a silent testament to a life I no longer belonged to, a world of privilege and secrets. The air still tasted of salt, but now there was an added tang of something metallic, something sharp that pricked at the back of my throat, like old blood. My mind replayed the events of the past few days. Now, someone was using his methods, his artistry on a grander scale. But this wasn't a copycat. This felt orchestrated. I walked slowly along the pier, my eyes scanning every detail. The cleats, the mooring lines, the weathered planks, nothing seemed out of place, yet everything felt wrong. I remembered the first serpent case, the meticulous planning, the almost theatrical presentation of each crime scene. He left no obvious fingerprints, no witnesses, only a single perfect serpent scale, a taunting flourish. This cufflink, it was too close, too deliberate. They were tall, their silhouette indistinct against the faint glow of the distant city lights. They paused as if sensing my presence, then melted back into the night, disappearing without a sound. My heart, despite my best efforts, gave a traitorous lurch. But it wasn't fear. It was a flicker of something else, a desperate hope that this ghost was more than just an echo. I approached the spot where the figure had stood, a faint scuff mark on the polished deck, a disturbance in the otherwise undisturbed grime. Nothing substantial, but enough to confirm I hadn't imagined it. Someone had been here, someone who knew this place, who moved with practiced stealth. The pieces were starting to align, forming a picture I was both drawn to and terrified of. This was more than just a series of robberies. This was a statement, a challenge, and it was aimed directly at me. The irony was a bitter pill. I was supposed to be out, washed up, a relic of a bygone era. But the past, it seemed, had a way of dragging I back, especially when it wore a familiar face. This was my investigation now, whether anyone sanctioned it or not. The serpent was back, or at least his ghost was, and I was the only one who could see the pattern. The only one who remembered the scales. The words themselves felt like a brand, a reminder of a foolish mistake, a miss. But this time, the miss wasn't mine. This time, it belonged to a phantom. My flashlight beam danced across the polished hulls of slumbering vessels, each one a silent testament to wealth and leisure. The rhythmic creak of ropes against wood was the only sound, a mournful lullaby in the oppressive stillness. My boots crunched on the damp gravel of the walkway, each step echoing the frantic beat of my own pulse. I wasn't supposed to be here, not anymore. But the pattern, the first two jobs were audacious, almost elegant in their execution. A private gallery emptied of its most valuable pieces, not a fingerprint left behind. Then, a vault within a secure financial institution breached with surgical precision, the contents gone, the alarms silent. Now this. A private collection, rumored to hold artifacts of immense historical value, housed in a fortified warehouse on the water's edge, supposedly impenetrable. I reached the designated warehouse, a hulking, anonymous structure that seemed to absorb the scant moonlight. The air here was thicker, carrying the faint, metallic tang of something I couldn't quite place. My flashlight beam, now steady, swept over the corrugated metal walls, searching for any sign of forced entry. Nothing. The massive loading bay doors were shut tight, a solid barrier against the night. But then my light caught something. A subtle disturbance in the dust, coating the concrete apron leading to a side entrance. A faint, almost imperceptible scuff mark, as if something heavy had been dragged. My gut tightened. This was more than just a simple break-in. This was a carefully orchestrated extraction. I moved closer, my senses on high alert. The side door, a heavy steel panel, looked as solid as the rest of the structure. No pry marks, no drilled larks. I ran my gloved hand along its surface, feeling for any anomaly. My fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible seam near the bottom. It was too clean, too perfect to be accidental. A pressure plate, perhaps, or a sophisticated magnetic lark disengaged by some unseen mechanism. I knelt, my flashlight aimed at the ground. The scuff mark was clearer now, leading away from the door and towards the water. It was deep, as if whatever had been moved had significant weight. My gaze followed the faint trail to the edge of the dark, where a small, utilitarian boat was moored, its engine cover slightly ajar. The precision, the audacity. It was him, the ghost I'd chased through the city's underbelly for months, the one who'd vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of bodies and unanswered questions. I'd failed then. The thought was a bitter taste in my mouth. I'd let him slip through my fingers, a knot of shame and regret that had festered for years. I flinched, dropping my flashlight. It clattered on the concrete, its beam skittering wildly. "Hold it right there," a gruff voice barked. Not police, not security. They moved with a predatory grace, their stances suggesting they were more than capable of handling themselves. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I hadn't expected company, and these weren't the kind of people I expected to find at a yacht marina after midnight, unless I was already in deep trouble. "Who the hell are I?" one of them demanded, his voice a low growl. My mind raced. I could try to bluff, to feign ignorance, but the look in their eyes, the way they held themselves, told me they wouldn't be easily fooled. They were part of this, part of the plan. "Just admiring the boats," I managed, my voice rougher than I intended. A harsh laugh escaped the other figure. "Admiring them right before they get stolen, maybe. I ran in the wrong place, pal." My gaze flickered to the warehouse. The side door, the scuff marks, the boat. It all clicked into place with a sickening finality. This wasn't just a heist. It was a grand finale, and I had stumbled right into the middle of it. The stakes, already high, had just skyrocketed. The ghost wasn't just repeating his past crimes. He was escalating them, bolder than ever. And I, the disgraced detective, was now caught in the crosshairs, a lone wolf circling a pack of predators. This was no longer just about catching a killer. This was about survival. And maybe, just maybe, redemption. But first, I had to get out of this alive. The salty air bit at my lungs, a sharp, clean contrast to the stale fear that had been my constant companion. The yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number, the anonymous tip had dripped with a familiar kind of menace. I'd found myself here, a phantom in the moon-drenched stillness, the polished hulls of pleasure craft gleaming like sleeping beasts. Each one a potential hiding place. Each creak of the dark, a whisper of danger. My flashlight beam danced across the weathered wood, tracing the numbers on the cleats. Slip 47, then 48, and then a jarring anomaly, slip 49. It wasn't just the number that felt wrong, it was the absence. No gleaming chrome, no polished teak, just a dark, empty space where a vessel should have been moored. A phantom slip, a phantom boat. A low hum vibrated through the soles of my boots, a sound I recognized with a jolt. An engine, not a small outboard, but something substantial, powering up. It was coming from further out, beyond the immediate cluster of darks. My pulse quickened, not with the frantic beat of panic, but with a grim, focused urgency. This was it. This was the connection. The beam of my light swept the water, catching the glint of disturbed waves. A disturbance that was moving steadily away from the marina. Then, a flicker of movement on the shore silhouetted against the faint glow of the distant city lights, watching the departing boat. They were too far to discern any features, but the stillness of their posture spoke volumes. Not a casual observer. This was someone waiting, someone observing, someone who knew, the targets, the meticulous planning. It wasn't just about the money. That much was becoming terrifyingly clear. My mind replayed the files, the faded photographs, the interviews long past, the victims of the phantom killer, not random. Each one had been connected subtly to the city's underbelly, to deals gone sour, to reputations tarnished, and the heists. The same pattern was emerging. The jewelry store, a front for illicit diamonds. The rare coin collection, traced to a notorious fence. The art gallery, its owner whispered to be involved in smuggling. This phantom wasn't just stealing. They were settling scores, or perhaps, more disturbingly, they were reclaiming something. I pulled out my burner phone, the cool plastic a familiar weight in my hand, the old informant. He owed me. Big, a text message, terse and to the point, need info on Phantom Slip 49, and who profits from erased histories. The weight was agonizing. Every gust of wind, every lapping wave seemed to mark my impatience. The ghost of my past case, the one that had driven me from the force, felt closer than ever. The Phantom Killer. I'd been so sure I had him, so close, and then nothing. He'd vanished, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a gaping hole in my career. My phone buzzed, a sharp, unwelcome sound in the quiet night. A single cryptic reply, the Serpent's Coil. They unwind things for a price. The Serpent's Coil. They were a ghost story whispered in the dark corners of the city, a syndicate so deep, so insidious, that even the most hardened criminals avoided their gaze. They dealt in secrets, in leverage, in the careful erasure of inconvenient truths. A pattern, a motive, and a name. But how did it tie back to me? To the Phantom Killer I'd failed to catch? Was this a continuation, a twisted homage, or something far more personal? The Phantom's slip at the marina. It wasn't just an empty space. It was a statement. I stood there, the vast expanse of the water before me, the city lights a distant, indifferent glow. The Serpent's Coil. They dealt in unwinding things. What had they been unwinding here? In the silent depths of the yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number. And what unfinished business had drawn me back into this labyrinth, where the lines between past and present, hunter and hunted, blurred into an indistinguishable haze. The mystery was no longer deepening. It was consuming me. The salt spray, sharp and biting, stung my cheeks as I navigated the slick planks of the yacht marina after midnight. Wrong slip number. The air thrummed with a nervous energy, a low hum beneath the creak of taut ropes and the distant, mournful cry of a foghorn. My informant, a twitchy man with eyes that darted like trapped birds, had given me a location, a time, and a name: Sealers. He claimed Sealers was the one who could connect the current string of robberies to the Serpent's Coil, a name that still tasted like ash in my mouth. The address led me to a stretch of gleaming white hulls, bobbing gently in the inky water. Each vessel was a monument to excess, their polished chrome and teak gleaming under the sparse security lights. I checked the slip number again, 7B. It matched the crumpled note in my pocket, but the figure waiting there, silhouetted against the faint glow of a distant city skyline, wasn't what I expected. He was tall, too tall, his frame draped in a tailored coat that seemed to absorb the meager light. His face was obscured by shadow, but the stillness of his posture, the way he held himself, spoke of coiled power. Not the jittery, desperate energy of my informant, but something far more dangerous, something patient. Cole. The voice was a low rumble, surprisingly smooth like polished obsidian. It wasn't Sealers. My gut tightened. This was a misdirection, a trap sprung before I'd even stepped into the snare. Where's Sealers? I kept my voice level, my hand inching towards the reassuring weight of the piece I carried under my jacket. The figure chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. Sealers has retired, moved on to greener pastures. He was never meant to be the face of this operation, you understand. Operation? I took a step back, my eyes scanning the surrounding yachts. Empty. The silence here was a heavy blanket, suffocating. What operation? I'm looking for information about the heists. And you found it, the stranger said, taking a step forward. Now I could see his face, sharp and aristocratic, with eyes that held a predatory glint. He was younger than I'd imagined, but the weariness etched around his mouth suggested he'd seen more than his years implied. You see, Cole, the Serpent's Coil is not just a syndicate. It's a philosophy. We appreciate efficiency, and your past work, you're involved. I am the Coil, he stated, not with arrogance, but with a quiet, undeniable certainty. And those heists you're so concerned about, they are merely the shedding of old skin, a necessary precursor to something grander. Something that will make your past failures look like child's play. Past failures. The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken accusation. He knew. He knew about the killer I'd hunted, the one who'd slipped through my fingers like smoke, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. They were echoed in the meticulous planning of the current heists. I'd seen the similarities, dismissed them as coincidence, a desperate attempt by my mind to reconnect with a phantom. But now, "You're using his methods," I accused, the realization dawning with sickening clarity. "You're trying to frame him, or you're him." Another dry chuckle. "The serpent sheds its skin, Cole. It adapts, it evolves. The old ways were effective, certainly. But we have learned, we have improved. And you, my dear Cole, you are still chasing ghosts. You always have been." He reached into his coat, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought he was drawing a weapon. But instead, he produced a small, intricately carved wooden snake. It was identical to the token I'd found at the scene of the last heist, the one I'd dismissed as a random piece of debris, and the token I'd found at the scene of the first murder years ago. "This," he said, holding it out, "is a calling card, a reminder that the past is never truly buried, and that some debts, Cole, can only be paid in blood." Before I could react, before I could even fully process the implication, a blinding flash of light erupted from the yacht beside us. A deafening roar followed, and the air was ripped apart by concussive force. I stumbled back, disoriented, the smell of ozone and burnt metal filling my nostrils. When my vision cleared, the stranger was gone. The yacht he'd been standing near was engulfed in flames, a towering inferno against the night sky. I scrambled towards the burning vessel, the heat scorching my face. "Hey!" I yelled, my voice raw. "Hey, is anyone there?" Nothing but the crackle of flames and the groan of metal. The informant's words echoed in my mind, the serpent's coil. "They deal in secrets, Inla." He'd never finished. Now I understood why. They dealt in obliteration. I turned away from the inferno, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. He wasn't Sealer's. He was someone else, someone far more dangerous. He knew about my past, my failures. He was using the killer's methods, or perhaps he was the killer, reborn, remade. And he had just laid a trap, a devastating display of power that had wiped out any immediate chance of getting answers. My informant was likely dead, or worse. It was a raging fire, and I had just walked straight into its heart. The setback was absolute. I had nothing. And he, whoever he was, had everything. The salty air, thick with the phantom scent of burnt rubber from the informant's pyre, did little to clear my head. It clung to my skin like a shroud, the serpent's coil. The name itself was a whisper, a promise of secrets uncoiled, of truths laid bare, and then, of course, of obliteration. He'd seen it or felt it, and now it was my turn to feel the burn. My old car, a faithful but weary beast, coughed its way through the deserted streets, the only sound the rhythmic slap of tires on damp asphalt. The address the informant had scribbled on that singed scrap of paper led me not to a shadowy warehouse or a grimy alley, but to the polished sheen of a yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number. A stark contrast to the fiery end I just witnessed. Here, moonlight glinted off chrome and polished teak, the silent behemoths of wealth barbing gently against their moorings. The slip number was indeed wrong. The one I was looking for, number 47, was a sleek obsidian hull, its name the Oracle etched in silver script. But the one I'd been directed to, number 48, was a gleaming white monstrosity, all sweeping lines and unnecessary grandeur. A quick scan of the deck revealed no one, just the gentle creak of ropes and the distant hum of the city. My gut twisted. This was too clean, too public. The informant had been thorough, meticulous even in his final moments. Why send me here, to a place that screamed of opulence rather than the clandestine dealings I'd come to expect from the serpent's coil? Unless, maybe they operated in plain sight, their transactions hidden behind a veneer of respectability. I moved along the gangplank, my footsteps unnervingly loud on the polished wood. The air grew heavy, not with the scent of the sea, but with something else. A faint, cloying perfume, like wilting lilies. It was out of place, incongruous with the salty tang. It looked like dried wine, but something about its irregular shape. It snagged my attention. I knelt, my fingers brushing against the cool, slightly sticky surface. It wasn't wine. A shiver traced its way down my spine, a familiar sensation, the prickle of recognition that always preceded a sudden horror. A muffled sound from below deck. A soft thud, followed by a choked gasp. My hand instinctively went to the sidearm tucked beneath my jacket. I moved towards the main cabin door, my breath held tight. It was unlocked. The interior was as ostentatious as the exterior, all plush velvet and polished brass. The cloying scent of lilies was stronger here, almost suffocating. In the center of the salon, a man lay sprawled on the floor. His eyes were wide, unseeing, fixed on the ornate chandelier above. He was the owner, I presumed. The serpent had struck again, not with fire this time, but with a silent, insidious poison. On a nearby mahogany table, a half-empty glass of amber liquid sat beside an open ledger. My gaze fell on the ledger. The entries were a cryptic mix of financial figures and what appeared to be coded messages. Dates, names, and then, interspersed, symbols. A coiled serpent. A single, dripping eye. I flipped through the pages, my heart thrumming a heavy, insistent rhythm against my ribs. The names that appeared in the ledger were familiar, too familiar. Politicians, industrialists, even a few faces from the city's judicial branch. And then I saw it. A recurring entry linked to a series of dates that corresponded with the heists. Not just the current ones, but the ones from years ago. The ones that had led to my downfall. The informant's last words. They deal in secrets, in la, echoed again. Not leisure, not lead. Leak. They dealt in leaking secrets, in exposing the rot beneath the polished surface. They weren't about the money. They were about retrieving evidence, about silencing those who might betray them, about maintaining their perfect, deadly equilibrium. The perpetrator wasn't just a new player in the underworld. This was someone who knew me, someone who knew my past. My eyes scanned the ledger again, searching for a name, a connection, anything that would bridge the gap between then and now. And then a faint annotation, almost an afterthought beside a particularly large sum. For the final piece, the serpent's true gift to the city. The final piece, the gift. It clicked into place with a sickening lurch. The killer I'd failed to catch wasn't just a killer, they were a collector. And the heists were merely a means to an end, a way to acquire the items that would complete their morbid collection. My collection, my failure. I looked at the dead man, his face a mask of surprise and betrayal. He was just another pawn, another secret the serpent's coil had decided to bury. The perfume, the lilies, it was a signature, a morbid floral flourish on their deadly work. I ran my finger through it again, the sticky residue clinging to my skin. It wasn't just blood. It was mixed with something else, a fine, almost invisible powder. The same powder that had been found at the scene of the first heist, the one that had been dismissed as industrial residue. The pieces were fitting together, but the picture they formed was far more terrifying than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about a new string of heists. This was about a ghost from my past, resurrected and re-energized, using the serpent's coil as their new playground. And I, Cole, was once again caught in their deadly embrace. The wrong slip number had led me to the right truth, and it was a truth that threatened to drown me. The salt spray, a familiar sting, bit at my cheeks as I navigated the slick planks of the yacht marina after midnight. Wrong slip number. The air hung thick with the briny perfume of decay and diesel, a scent that always settled in my gut like a stone. The moonlight, fractured by the restless water, painted a chaotic silver path towards the moored vessels, each a silent, hulking shadow against the ink-black sky. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was a cold certainty, a phantom limb ache that throbbed with every creak of the dark beneath my worn soles. He wasn't just taking things, he was taking pieces. And the final piece, the one that would finally complete the macabre tableau etched into my nightmares, was closer than I dared to admit. The heists, so precise, so clinical, were a prelude, a warm-up. The real artistry, the true exhibition of his twisted genius, was yet to come, and I had a sickening premonition of what, or rather, who, that artistry would involve. My gaze swept across the barbing masts, each one a skeletal finger pointing accusingly at the sky. I traced the pattern, the subtle deviations from the original MO, the escalating audacity. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling, like pulling threads from a fraying tapestry, each revealed not a fresh wound. The stolen artifacts weren't random. They were curated, chosen, and the last item on his list. It had to be personal. It had to be mine. My hand instinctively went to the reassuring weight of the pistol tucked beneath my jacket, not for show, not for bravado. This was the only language he seemed to understand. Looking for something. The voice, low and gravelly, cut through the night. It wasn't the voice I expected, not the smooth, almost effeminate tone of the informant who'd fed me the last crumb of bread. This was rougher, laced with a weariness that spoke of long nights and harder choices. A dark worker, judging by the faded overalls and the oil stains that seemed permanently etched into the fabric. He carried a coil of thick rope, his movements deliberate, unhurried. Too unhurried, perhaps. This is a bit late for a stroll, isn't it? I finally managed, my voice a low rumble, trying to keep the tension from coiling too tightly in my chest. He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Some of us work the night shift, detective. Even the fancy boats need looking after. Detective. The word hung in the air, a ghost of a life I'd left behind. He knew, or he suspected. Either way, it put me on edge. I seen anyone unusual around here, anyone who doesn't belong. The dark worker stopped, his silhouette stark against the moon-drenched water. Unusual is a matter of perspective, ain't it? He was seeing a lot of folks come and go from these slips, rich folks mostly, always thinking they own the world. He paused, then added, but there was one fella, earlier, looked like he was admiring the view, real close up. My pulse quickened. Admiring the view, hood up, couldn't see much, but he had a peculiar gait, like he was carrying something heavy, and he kept looking back. Went that way, slip 3B. Slip 3B, not the wrong slip number. The right one, the one I'd been sent to. Did I speak to him? Nah, didn't want trouble, and he didn't seem to want company. The dark worker shrugged, a surprisingly fluid movement. Just kept to himself. Slip 3B. The nameplate gleamed dully in the moonlight. Serenity, a cruel joke. My breath hitched as I reached the gangplank. The air here was different, cleaner, with a faint, cloying scent of expensive perfume beneath the salt. And then I saw it. On the polished teak deck, directly in the center of the aft, lay a single, perfect white orchid. It was identical to the ones that had been found at the scene of every single one of his previous crimes. But this time, it wasn't just a calling card. It was a message, a promise. And beneath the orchid, tucked into the delicate petals, was a small, folded piece of parchment. My fingers, trembling slightly, reached for it. The paper was thick, embossed with a crest I recognized with a sickening lurch. It was the crest of the old family estate, my family estate, the place where my sister had grown up, where she still lived in the quiet, sun-dappled rooms that had once echoed with our laughter. The stakes had just been raised. He wasn't just collecting my past, he was threatening my future. He was threatening her. And this time, the hunt wasn't just for justice, it was for survival. The nameplate, Serenity, marked me. A cruel joke indeed. I stood on the polished teak of slip 3B, the yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number. My boot heels scuffed against the wood, a grating sound in the otherwise hushed night. The air, thick with the metallic tang of salt and the faint, cloying perfume of expensive polish, felt wrong. It was supposed to be the Serenity, but the name etched into the brass plate was different. The Nightingale, my jaw tightened. A simple mistake, perhaps, a misdirection, or a deliberate trap. The thought coiled in my gut, a cold, familiar serpent. I'd walked into 100 traps before, most of them of my own making. But this felt different. This felt orchestrated, a stage set with me as the reluctant, unwitting player. I scanned the darks, the sleek, dark hulls of other vessels barbing gently, their masts like skeletal fingers against the bruised velvet of the sky. The silence was heavy, pregnant with unseen eyes. The perpetrator, this phantom who moved with such unnerving precision, was likely watching. Waiting. My own breath seemed too loud, a ragged testament to my unease. A tip about a meeting, a handover right here, right now. A chance to finally glimpse the architect of these brutal echoes of my past. I took a slow, deliberate step onto the gangplank of the Nightingale. The wood groaned softly beneath my weight. The scent of jasmine, faint but persistent, tickled my nostrils. Jasmine. The same scent that had clung to the air at the scene of the first crime, the one that had haunted my dreams for a decade. A deliberate echo, a taunt. My hand instinctively went to the worn leather of my jacket, feeling the reassuring weight of the small, cold metal object tucked into an inner pocket. Not a weapon, not really, more of a sentimental reminder, a piece of the puzzle I'd never quite solved. I reached the deck. It was pristine, Immaculate. No sign of recent activity, no discarded cigarette butts, no scuff marks. It was as if the yacht had been scrubbed clean by a phantom hand. I moved through the open saloon doors, my footsteps muffled by thick plush carpet. Moonlight streamed through the panoramic windows, illuminating the opulent interior. White leather, polished mahogany, abstract art that seemed to writhe in the dim light. Everything screamed money, taste, and an almost fanatical attention to detail. My gaze swept over the room, searching for anything out of place. A misplaced cushion, a forgotten glass, nothing. The perpetrator was too clever for such amateurish slip-ups. They were a ghost, leaving no trace. But ghosts, I knew, were often made of smoke and mirrors. And smoke could be dispersed, mirrors shattered. I found myself in the main cabin, a space designed for lavish entertaining. A long, polished bar stood against one wall, gleaming with bottles of amber and clear liquids. On a nearby table, a single, half-empty glass of what looked like expensive scotch sat beside an open book. The title was obscured by the angle, but the binding was rich, embossed leather. I picked up the glass, the condensation cool against my fingertips. No fingerprints, of course, not that I expected any. I sniffed it cautiously. The aroma of peat and oak, familiar, yet tinged with something else. Something subtly floral, almost sweet. The scent was stronger here, weaving its way through the alcoholic bouquet. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments. A staged scene, a breadcrumb trail leading nowhere or everywhere. I walked to the railing, looking out at the inky black water. The trap. I'd come here expecting to spring one, but it seemed I was the one ensnared. Had I misread the tip? Had my desperation to find answers clouded my judgment? Then I saw it. A glint of metal beneath a velvet cushion on one of the plush sofas. My heart gave a jolt, a sudden, sharp acceleration. I moved towards it, my steps silent, deliberate. I lifted the cushion. It was a small silver locket, old-fashioned, intricately engraved. I'd seen it before, in a photograph of the first victim. This wasn't a trap for me. It was a message, a twisted offering. The perpetrator wasn't just mimicking the past, they were reliving it, and they wanted me to know. I opened the locket. Inside, on one side, was a miniature portrait, faded with age. A young woman, her eyes wide and innocent. On the other side, a tiny, folded piece of paper. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. 4 words written in elegant, looping script. "You missed me, detective." A wave of something akin to nausea washed over me. The jasmine scent seemed to intensify, suffocating me. This wasn't just about the heists. It was personal. The perpetrator knew me. They knew my history. They were playing a game, and I was a pawn, moved across the board with deliberate cruelty. But then, as the initial shock subsided, a different emotion began to surface. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they were in control. They were wrong. They had revealed themselves, not just their methods, but their motive. This was a game of ego, of taunting, and in their arrogance they had made a mistake. I closed the locket, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat that now burned in my veins. They wanted me to play their game. Fine, I would play, but I would play by my own rules. I would turn their meticulously crafted trap into my own. I had the locket, a tangible piece of their obsession. And I had the scent of jasmine, a phantom scent that would lead me not to confusion, but to clarity. The hunt was on. And this time, I wouldn't be the one caught in the crosshairs. The salt spray stung my face, a welcome shock against the cloying sweetness of jasmine. I'd followed the scent, a phantom trail leading me to this yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number. The moonlight painted skeletal shadows across the polished hulls of dormant vessels. My gut churned, a sickening mix of dread and a desperate, burning need to know. The scent, so out of place here, was the only thread I had. It clung to the air like a guilty secret. I moved from slip to slip, the rhythmic lapping of water against the pilings the only sound. The jasmine was stronger now, a heavy perfume that promised decay. A single, bare bulb glowed faintly from its deck. My hand found the worn grip of the service pistol tucked into my waistband. I climbed the gangplank, each creak a betrayal. The deck was slick with dew. A faint light spilled from an open hatch. The jasmine smell was overwhelming, almost suffocating. I descended into the cabin. It was sparsely furnished, utilitarian, Yet a strange, almost theatrical, opulence lay beneath the surface. A single, ornate birdcage sat on a small table, empty. And then I saw it. A small ceramic diffuser, its tiny reeds still weeping the potent jasmine oil. His face was a study in stillness, eyes like chips of ice in the dim light. He wore a tailored suit, incongruous with the gritty reality of a stolen yacht. "It's over," I said, my voice rough. He chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "Over, my dear Cole, it's just beginning." He gestured around the cabin. "Do you like it? A little slice of paradise, wouldn't you agree? Paradise for who? The people you've robbed blind." My hand tightened on my weapon. "Such a limited perspective. You always did focus on the mundane, the tangible. You missed the art, the poetry." He stepped closer, and I caught a faint, metallic tang beneath the jasmine. Not blood, but something sharp, sterile. "You know who I am," I stated, my mind racing. "You know about me. Why?" "Oh, I know a great deal about you, Cole. I've been studying your work, your failures." He knew about Sarah. The memory, a raw, gaping wound, threatened to overwhelm me. "This game," he spread his hands, "is designed to expose that, to show the world how easily you can be manipulated." He moved towards a small, locked chest. My instincts screamed danger. I lunged, my pistol raised. He was faster than he looked, a blur of motion. Pain exploded behind my eyes, and I stumbled back, the world tilting. He stood over me, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. "See, predictable, always the brute force, never the finesse." He knelt beside the chest, his fingers working a small, intricate lark. I pushed myself up, my head pounding. The jasmine was a thick, suffocating blanket. Metallic tang was stronger now. I saw it then, glinting on a small silver tray next to the diffuser, a hypodermic needle, and a small vial. The liquid inside was clear, almost colorless. "What is that?" I demanded, my voice strained. He looked up, his eyes alight with a perverse glee. "A little something to help you remember, Cole, to truly feel the weight of your past. A potent sedative, enhanced. It amplifies existing anxieties, brings latent fears to the forefront. Imagine your worst nightmare, amplified 100-fold. He held up the vial, a parting gift. It was a personal vendetta, a twisted form of retribution. He wanted to break me, not just physically, but mentally, to make me relive my failures, my deepest regrets, amplified until I shattered. The yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number, was his stage. And I, the unwilling actor, was about to perform my own personal hell. I took a step forward, the floor swaying beneath me. The fight was far from over. The chill of the night air, usually a bracing slap to my senses, felt like a shroud. The tang of salt and diesel, normally a comfort, now tasted like ash on my tongue. The confrontation had been a blur of strained muscles and ragged breaths, a desperate dance on the precipice of oblivion. Now, only the echoes remained, a hollow symphony in the vast emptiness. I traced the jagged scar on my palm, a souvenir from a desperate struggle. The glint of moonlight on the polished brass of a nearby railing caught my eye. It was absurd, really, the small details that clung to memory when the grand narrative threatened to unravel. The stranger lay sprawled near the pilings, a crumpled heap against the weathered wood. The carefully constructed facade had finally cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath. His boasts, his threats, his elaborate plan, it had all dissolved into a pathetic whimper. I'd seen it before, this desperate scramble for control when the walls closed in. It was a familiar dance, one I'd witnessed in the eyes of men who thought they were guards, only to be brought low by their own hubris. A colleague arrived, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path, a jarring interruption to the quiet. They surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, their expression unreadable. "I handled it," the colleague stated, the words clipped and devoid of emotion. It wasn't a question. "He was meticulous," I admitted, the words tasting foreign. Meticulous, that was the word. It had all led back to this lonely stretch of the waterfront under a sky dusted with indifferent stars. My gaze drifted to a discarded piece of paper near the stranger's outstretched hand. I knelt, my movements stiff, and picked it up. It was a torn page from a ledger, filled with a series of dates and figures, scrawled in the stranger's hurried hand. Nothing immediately screamed significance, yet it felt important, a loose thread perhaps in the tapestry of his obsession. I tucked it into my coat pocket, a silent promise to unravel its meaning. The colleague cleared their throat. They're securing the area. There was a quiet efficiency to their arrival, a familiar rhythm that had once been the soundtrack to my life. Now, it felt like a distant melody, played in a forgotten key. He wanted to make me pay, I said, more to myself than to the colleague. To make me feel the weight of what I'd lost, the ghost of the unsolved case. The phantom presence that had stalked my dreams felt a little less potent now. Not gone, not entirely, but diminished, but not good enough. I looked at my hands. They were steady now, the tremor that had plagued them for months finally subsiding. The weight of the past hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. It was no longer a crushing burden, but a scar, a reminder of battles fought and lessons learned. The cold air still bit at my skin, but it no longer felt like a shroud. It was just air, sharp and clean, filling my lungs with a breath that felt earned. Back in my cramped apartment, the ledger page lay on my desk, illuminated by the harsh glare of a single lamp. The dates and figures, when cross-referenced with old case files, began to form a pattern. Not a pattern of violence, as I'd initially suspected, but one of desperation. The stranger hadn't been trying to replicate the killer's methods for his own gain, but to expose a truth. The revelation settled over me, not with a bang, but with a quiet, profound understanding. The stranger's obsession, his meticulously planned heists, were not a personal vendetta against me, but a desperate attempt to expose a deeper corruption. He had been trying to force my hand, to draw me into the light so I could see what he had seen. The true architect of the chaos remained elusive, a phantom I had almost missed in my singular focus on the man in front of me. The stranger's actions, though misguided, had served their purpose. He had, in his own desperate way, led me to the precipice of the truth. The weight on my shoulders hadn't lifted entirely, but it had changed shape. The personal vendetta had been a misdirection, a clever ploy to keep me chasing the wrong ghost. The real fight, I now understood, was just beginning. The puzzle pieces, though scattered, were starting to align, revealing a much larger, far more dangerous picture. The taste of ash on my tongue was fading, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of a new and far more complex hunt.